Happy New Year, 2021, the year of TBC. It's got to be in it. It's got to be coming. We know it's coming. But listen, I get asked the same questions quite frequently over on Twitch. Scottejaye87, by the way. If you don't follow me, go over and check me out. Now, these questions I love answering them. So I thought, well, I've sort of compiled all of these questions, and I'm going to put a video out every day this week covering basically the most frequently asked questions on Twitch. They're going to range in length. You know, some might only be 10 minutes, some might be 5 minutes. You know, so they're going to range in length. This one's probably going to be a fairly short one because it's quite opinionated. It's more what I think and what I feel, rather than, I would say, facts. You know, as in they are going to be facts that I give you, but you could still say, well, no. Like if I said, I'll give you an example. What we're going to be talking about today is why I think TBC is better than vanilla.
Round one, fight!
Or classic as we know it now. Because I get asked it a lot, you know, like, why are you so excited about TBC? You know, what does it bring? Why do you want it? That could be quite opinionated. I might say I like flying. I'm looking forward to having flying mounts. You might be sat there like, you're an idiot, mate. No one wants flying mounts. Now, flying's not actually part of this video, but yeah, it does come in TBC. Why am I so excited about TBC? You know, why don't I just play classic? Why do I spend all my time on private servers? Now, I'm going to give you the top sort of 5-6 reasons that I'm excited about TBC. So mainly we're going to be talking about, you know, systems that are going to get brought in, or, you know, changes that are going to make quite big changes to the game and the way it plays, and why I then prefer it to classic. Now, you'll probably agree with me on some of them. So we'll kick straight off with basically the class design. The more well thought out sort of talents and abilities, you know, the new abilities, like filling in those gaps. You know, back in the day, they obviously saw the gaps in some of the classes. For example, we'll use a prop paladin. They didn't have a taunt. So they didn't just give the paladin a taunt, they gave them something a little bit different. You know, it's a little bit of a different taunt. Obviously, we get around it with a macro. So basically, if you don't know, the prop paladin taunt that they get in TBC, you know, you have to target the person who's being attacked, and then it will taunt off the 3 mobs, like up to 3 mobs that are on them. It's also a range taunt, which is really nice. And it's a multi-target taunt, which is nice, but can have problems at the same time. Because obviously, if you're on tanking duty and you need to taunt one single mob, but there's 2 attacking the main tank, let's say you're the off tank, there's 2 targets attacking the main tank, it's going to make life very difficult for you to just pick your one target off. But still, it's a taunt, it's unique, and, you know, it's very good. And then when we think about some of the other classes, so, you know, priests being that new mana battery, you know, through vampiric touch. So it's probably worth just a quick, you know, sort of glance over when we think about the end talents. You know, you've got rogues getting Shadow Step, which is absolutely amazing in Arena. You know, you've got druids getting their Tree of Life form, paladins getting Avenger Shield, you know, mages getting their new pet. I know it's on a cooldown, but, you know, the water elemental, still very nice. I mean, the list goes on. Obviously, you know, all the classes get normally at least one really nice, you know, out of the 3 trees, one really nice end talent in TBC. But the main thing for me when we talk about classes is that they've all become viable. And what I mean by that is, you know, you wouldn't be that bothered about having a boomkin, for example, in your raid in Classic at the moment. But in TBC, you're going to want one. Most guilds are going to have a boomy just to buff your warlocks. And that's not the only reason. You know, they do reasonable damage, bring good utility and all of that. You know, I'm not going to start hating on any classes here. But, I mean, even Shadow Priests. You're not bothered about having a Shadow Priest in Classic, but you're going to want 1 to 2 all the time in TBC. This now gives you options. You know, if you're currently playing, let's say you're playing a Druid and you don't enjoy tanking in Classic, you're probably going to be Resto. You know, if you've watched this channel for a while, you know, I've played Feral DPS all through Classic and Paladin a little bit later on. But even as the Paladin, I felt like I had a bit of a hard time because I didn't want to be a prop Paladin that can't actually tank very well. I didn't want to be a rep Paladin that can't really DPS very well. It's like, but you're a great healer. You know, you want to play not the strongest spec out of the 3, but you want to play something that's going to at least benefit your guild and, you know, help the people that you're raiding with. By me going prot or ret as a Paladin, I don't feel that I'd probably deserve that raid spot over, you know, potentially a warrior or a rogue if I was ret. So I think one of the big things for me is the fact that now these classes all can serve a purpose. There's still some specs, you know, some specs that are not particularly viable, but then they're probably viable in PvP. So, you know, using a Disc Priest, for example. You want a Holy Priest, or you want them just going down into Discipline as far as getting IDS. But, you know, or Shadow. Holy or Shadow, or Holy / a bit of Disc. But a full Disc Priest in TBC, probably you're not going to see many, if any. But extremely strong in PvP. So, you know, it doesn't matter when you look at all 3 specs. They're every spec has pretty much got some sort of usefulness somewhere, whether it's in PvP or PvE or maybe both if you're a warlock. I also like the shift in the meta, and I mean that comes down to a little bit about raids, which we'll touch on shortly. And then when you hear about class stacking in TBC, yeah, you're going to see a lot of hunters and a lot of warlocks in raids, but that's not it. That's not like all you're going to take, because you're still bringing all the other hybrid classes or support classes, whatever you want to call, to actually buff your warlocks and your hunters, the ones who are going to be doing big damage in quite early on low levels of gear. You know, hunters, for example, being able to get their bloody four set from dungeons and absolutely pump like a beast, you know, so early on. Overall, I like the class design in TBC versus Classic. So that's point one. Now, I could have gone into so much more detail there, obviously, but if you want to know my thoughts and also the stream's thoughts, because we've done it together live, then check out my class picking guide. I'll put a link in the description to that as well, so you can check that out. Then the next one's a little bit weird, and you're probably going to be like, I think he's losing his mind. But professions. I prefer the professions in TBC. You know, we get dual crafting, and I'm a big fan of dual crafting. You know, you're probably sitting there like, professions, what, when everybody's going level working? But not everyone will be going level working. Yes, it may be the best profession to go, but you still only need 20 out of 25. And you got to remember, the healing group doesn't need it as much as the DPS groups. But when I talk about professions, what I really like is the sets that have been added. You know, they may be overpowered, they may carry you into tier 5, but everybody has pretty much got a set that's quite viable to use. So it means your professions are more meaningful, what ones you're going to pick. And then obviously, you know, enchanting, being able to enchant their own rings, dual crafting, getting better gems when BT's released. There's, you know, every profession has got its place on a certain spec or a certain class. What do you work towards with professions in Classic as it stands at the moment? You know, at level 60, you go engineering for extra damage. You know, all right, blacksmith can make good stuff like Lionheart Helm or whatever, you know, some of the weapons, but it's not essential to actually go, you know, blacksmithing as a warrior, for example. But there will be a need to think about your professions a little bit more in TBC than you probably do now in Classic. And then the big one for some of you is arenas. Obviously, if you're PvPing and you love PvP, don't get me wrong, I'm not a massive PvPer. I enjoy it, but I just like to do it when I feel like doing it, you know, rather than that's not my primary reason for logging on. But arenas will get me PvPing far more than the Classic system, but that's not actually just because of them adding arenas and like the rating system and all of that, which is brilliant, a brilliant addition, and you know, I enjoy arenas far more than battlegrounds. But I think it goes hand in hand with the classes as well, with the new abilities and, you know, the more crowd control orientated style of fighting. It's just better. You know, PvP in TBC, that nearly rhymed, is just better than in Classic. So, you know, that's another thing that I'm always saying to people, you know, why I prefer it. Because as I say, even though I'm not going to sit in them all day, you know, I'd still like to go in there for a laugh, do some 2s, do some 3s, probably not overly serious, but there's going to be some PvP gear from arenas that is going to be really useful to you in PvE. So even as a PvEer, hardcore PvEer, you probably will do some arenas to get certain item slots. So, you know, again, just a good system added to the game. This is another one that you might be like, oh, I don't know, it sounds a bit grindy. But Heroic Dungeons. I love the addition of Heroic Dungeons. I like the way that they're gated, you know, behind a reputation. So if you want to do Arcatraz and Mechanar and Botanica Heroic, you need to get Shatar rep. You know, so you need to farm the normal dungeons, or, you know, if you can get that reputation from quests or from hand-ins, like from lower city hand-ins and things like that. You know, there's ways to get additional rep outside of just dungeon farming. But it adds another layer to the game. Even if you're in full BIS, I don't know, let's say tier 5 raid gear, or I mean, I'm not going to go as far as tier 6, even though there probably will still be some usefulness. You've got something to do, because these heroic dungeons, they drop badges of justice. Now, from badges of justice, you obviously trade them in at a vendor to get gear. Now, if you're a hybrid, so like me, you know, I'm going to be predominantly playing Paladin and Druid, I've got all those off-spec gear sets that I want to get up. So now, why would I go and do UBRS? You know, at level 60 at the moment, UBRS, Strat, Scolo, there's not really much need to go and do anything once you've got gear. Because even for off-spec, you're going to get better in Zul'Gurub, or you're going to get better in, you know, AQ20 or whatever. So it removes the point of doing dungeons. Whereas in TBC, there's always going to be, you know, something that you'll need from Badges of Justice. Because actually, as you get better geared, and as we get later through the game, there is other items that get added to the Badges of Justice vendor as well. So you're always going to want to be doing it, and that's good because, you know, there's certain attunements for raids that require heroic dungeons. Now, if, I don't know, 6 months late to the party or something like that, and you're trying to get heroic dungeon quests done for your attunement, it might start being a little bit more difficult to find a group. Whereas if people need badges, or even if they don't need badges but they want to save badges, you know, for when other things unlock, like when Shattered Sun Offensive, you know, rep launches and stuff like that, I just think there's more reason to actually go and do the content. And that, for me, keeping the content relevant all the way through the expansion, it's only a good thing. But you'll be doing a lot of heroics throughout the expansion, and there's a lot of them, and most of them are quite fun. Black Morass, that's it really. And then the big one, obviously, raids. Now, the raids are really well done. I like the aesthetics of most of the raids. Obviously, the bosses are more difficult. If you was to compare like for like, you know, even if you just compared, it doesn't matter whether you compare first tier or last tier. If you compare Sunwell Plateau to Nax, SWP is going to be a lot more difficult. If you was to compare Grawl and Magferrodon to any boss in Molten Core, Grawl and Magferrodon are going to be more difficult. I'm not saying they're going to be super hard, because, you know, that's one thing that I don't know. I don't know how the difficult is going to be in a classic TBC launch. But ultimately, the bosses are just more fun, more engaging, more rewarding to actually kill. As well as I say, a lot of people agree that Karazhan, I don't care whether it's the first raid, you know, and I don't care whether it's 2.0 itemization or 2.4.3. It is one of the best raids, and probably one of the most memorable raids for any of us who played back during TBC, whether we was super hardcore, clearing all content while it was relevant, or we was doing it all, you know, post-nerf. Karazhan always sticks out to most people. Whenever I talk to people, they're like, oh, Karazhan's my favourite raid. I don't know why. I don't know why it had that effect on everyone, including me. But I just love it. You know, I literally could do I will do Karazhan every week on my main and alt. Maybe multiple alts. Because it's a nice, fun, casual raid to do, you know, drunken Friday night with the boys, you know, and smash for a Karazhan. You know, it sticks out. But then when you look at all the other raids as well, obviously SSC, TK, you know, Black Temple, Hyjal, you know, all of the bosses are just engaging, just different mechanics, you know. Whereas if I was to compare it to Classic and look at like Blackwing Lair, where you've got 3 bosses in there that pretty much do all the same thing, and then even with Nax, you know, the Nax bosses are a massive step up in difficulty, don't get me wrong, you know, that's been proven. If the TBC raids were tuned just to an equal standard as Nax, then the TBC raids are going to be more difficult. But, as I say, more fun. But again, that's probably quite opinionated, you know, because you might absolutely love Nax at level 60, you know, whereas I, you know, absolutely love Black Temple at level 70, and I would say Black Temple is more difficult. You know, I suppose what raid you prefer really is quite a personal opinion, and that's what I said about this video. You know, it is just my opinion. And then I'd say the final one is... it's a bit boring, I'm sorry, but the actual questing system in TBC. If you was to play on a private server or whatever, you know, and you went from 1 to 60 in, you know, the classic vanilla zones, and then as soon as you step into Outland, the questing experience, doesn't matter how long it takes. Standard XP in Outland, it is quite a slog. I don't know if any of you who haven't played private servers remember, but it is quite a slog. But the overall, you know, the linear quest progression, you know, getting sent from one place to the next, doing that quest hub, then going somewhere else, you know, it's the more retail version of the questing experience that we're used to, rather than, you know, zone hopping, you know, at low level, you're level 12, 13, you're going to Westfall, to Redridge, back to Westfall, to Duskwood, back to Redridge, you know, you're just going backwards and forwards all over the place. Whereas this, you go, you do a zone, you move on to the next zone. And I just prefer that experience. And that's also why, you know, like the Blood Elf and Draenei starting zones, for example, they follow the TBC questing experience rather than the classic questing experience. It's gonna be quite a shock. You start your Blood Elf, you do all the starting zone, and then you end up in the Barrens, and you're like, oh, you know, you really enjoy the 1 to 20, and then from there on, you're back to the classic style of leveling. But yeah, I enjoy the questing. I'll be honest with you, that's about it. As I say, I appreciate this was quite an opinionated video. But yeah, I'll leave it there. Let me know your thoughts, why you prefer TBC to Classic, because I do appreciate, you know, some of the points that I've said people might not like. You know, you might enjoy other aspects of the game that you know, that I've not mentioned. But this wasn't an exhaustive list. I just wanted to, you know, this could have educated you. You might not have known about some of these new systems that are coming out. If there's any of it you want me to dig deeper into, then obviously let me know in the comments, and you might see it in a future video. But peace out.